A couple of years ago, I made a video sharing the state of my bookshelf, and it's been a couple of years, so I thought I'd make a update video, just sharing with you some of the more interesting things you can find on my bookshelf now. And so here goes. So starting off with this corner, we have these novels that I used to read as a kid. I still think quite fondly of these. And then here we have this copy of I, Robot. I got this quite recently. I was in Seattle and I was at a Barnes and Noble, and I just really wanted to get something, and I've been meaning to read Asimov for quite a while, and so that's why I picked this up. And this is a short story collection, but I was actually kind of disappointed by this because some of the stories just did not click that well for me, and I just found them quite boring and uninspired. And I remember one of the stories was pretty good. I think that would be, I think Runaround was pretty good, but a couple of the other stories were just plain disappointing, and so that's why I did not manage to finish this, and for that reason, I don't think I actually ever will, and so that's why this book will probably just end up sitting here uh, for the next decade, which is kind of sad. And then down below, I have this copy of Tales of Beetle the Bard, just a tie-in, little tie-in book from the Harry Potter universe. I really like Harry Potter, and so I flip through this from time to time. And then below that, I have this copy of Naive Set Theory. This is a really tiny, thin, elegant book on set theory. It's pretty accessible, relatively speaking, for a math book. It's really short. Starts off with the axioms of set theory and all that, and just slowly builds up to the number systems. And yeah, it's a tiny book, but I learned a ton from this. Highly recommend it if you're interested in mathematics. And then below that, I have this physics textbook, Introduction to Electrodynamics. If you've checked out my channel, my other videos on my channel, you'll see that I've actually done a ton of videos on the problems you can find in this textbook. So yeah, that's that. And then here I have this copy of Traces of Two Paths, and this is actually a video game tie-in novel uh, from the Final Fantasy VII remake video game. I was introduced to Final Fantasy VII by my girlfriend because she's a gamer as well, and so I played Remake and I played Rebirth, and I love those games. And then I learned of this novel. It's about just contains stories related to Aerith and Tifa, and I just realized I had to get this. And at first I was a bit unsure because this is actually a translation. The original is in Japanese, and I've had bad experiences with translations before. I've tried reading the Witcher novels, but those were translated from its original Polish to English, and those just didn't quite work quite well for me. They just didn't click. But the translation in this was superb. The prose was very smooth, and I highly recommend picking this up if you're interested in Final Fantasy and novels in general. And then here we have this copy of The Rise of Kyoshi, a tie-in novel to the Avatar: The Last Airbender universe. I'm a huge Last Airbender fan. I just love everything from that universe. There are actually a couple more novels apart from this one. There's a second Kyoshi novel, The Shadow of Kyoshi. There are two novels for Yang Chen, The Dawn of Yang Chen and Legacy of Yang Chen. And there are two novels for Roku. One of them just came out quite recently, The Reckoning of Roku and The Awakening of Roku. I've read all of the other novels except for the newer Roku one, and I actually have the physical copy of the Yang Chen novels and The Shadow of Kyoshi as well. But I've lent those to my girlfriend, and I don't know when she'll be getting around to reading those and returning those copies to me. So for now, I only have this on my shelf. And personally, I found this. I really enjoyed the Rise of Kyoshi. I found Shadow of Kyoshi a little disappointing because I found some of the more important plot points were resolved in a kind of just dissatisfying way. I just didn't enjoy. I didn't like how the book ended. I really liked the Yang Chen novels. I love the Yang Chen novels, and I just love Yang Chen as a character and the story and her story. And the author FC, I think he's on a hiatus for the time being. And if he does come back, I really do hope he writes a third Yang Chen novel. And if he does, I will definitely be reading it. And then down here, I have this copy of The Queen's Gambit. So I started off watching the Netflix show. I play a little bit of chess. I'm terrible at it. But I was, but but yeah, I was drawn to the show because of that. And so I watched the show, and then I picked up this novel. And I think this is one of those cases where I found the adaptation to be better than the original. I'm not sure if it's kind of sacrilegious for me to say that, but yeah, I just found the show to be better because for me, just some of the plot points and the characters were better fleshed out and made more sense. So yeah, for me, I just enjoyed the show better than the novel. And then here I have this copy of United of the Seven Kingdoms by George R. R. Martin. This is a short story collection. It comes with three stories. I believe they're called The Hedge Knight, The Sworn Sword, and The Mystery Knight. And I think there's a TV show coming out based on this, coming out in a couple of days or weeks, I think. And this is a spin off story set in the Game of Thrones universe. It's set around 100 years before the main events of the Game of Thrones series. And you don't have to have read the novels to dive into this one. If you've watched the show, I think you're perfectly ready to dive into these stories if you're interested. So yeah, I really enjoyed the first and third story. So that would be the Mystery Knight and the Hedge Knight. I was kind of disappointed by the second story. I just didn't like how it ended. The second story started off really strong, had a great middle, but the ending was just too abrupt and a bit dissatisfying, unsatisfying. And so yeah, so yeah, so that's that. And here I have these two really old copies of these are just popular science books. I haven't touched those in quite a while. And here I have this collection of stories from H.P. Lovecraft. And I'm actually a huge fan of Edgar Allan Poe. And then for Poe fans, we usually get recommended Lovecraft, and it took me all this time to finally get around to reading a bit of Lovecraft. I got this last year, and I think this copy is just absolutely beautiful. I just love the cover and the paper makes it look like it's an ancient tome. And I've only read a couple of the shorter stories from this. I haven't made it to Call of Cthulhu yet. I definitely should. And I'm also really interested in reading Colors Out of Space, which is also included in this. And so this is definitely still a going concern. Uh, I think I'll definitely be diving into this when I have time in the future. And so, yeah, that's that. And next to this, I have this copy of And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. So I love detective fiction, but read, I haven't read a lot of Agatha Christie. I read a lot of Sherlock Holmes, but I actually haven't read a single Hercule Poirot novel. I don't know if that's how you pronounce the name. I read a little bit of Miss Marple, but that's basically it. And so that's why this is definitely a problem I'm trying to rectify. So that's why on a different shelf, I recently got a copy of Murder on the Orient Express, which I intend to read soon. And then, so yeah, so I got this last year, and this was really fun to read. I had this piece of paper with me the whole time, and I was jotting down all the character names and just who got killed, the circumstances in which they died, and I was just trying really hard to figure out what happened. And so yeah, this was a fantastic read. I definitely recommend it. And then moving on to this next section of the bookshelf, I think I made less changes here compared to my video 5 years ago. Uh, Here we have my all-time favorite Harry Potter novels. I'm just a huge fan of Harry Potter. Grew up with these novels, and I think I've reread them like 3 or 4 times. I've even lost count. And you'll see I have two copies of The Goblet of Fire. That's because I've reread The Goblet of Fire so many times. This copy started crumbling, and then the binding came off, and so I have this Slytherin edition of The Goblet of Fire, which is absolutely beautiful. I'm really happy with this. Also, I should show you this. This is a massive Lord of the Rings. It comes with the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, and the Return of the King, and you'll see the back is actually missing because this thing is crumbling. And then you can see I also have In case you're wondering what this is actually, I just got this for fun. Uh, Back in ancient China, people used to carve wordings on, like they didn't have books, they didn't have paper. They would carve words on bamboo strips. So this is kind of like just a prop. So I just got this for fun, and yeah. So that's Quidditch Through the Ages and Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and more tie-in books to the Harry Potter novels. And so yeah, those are the more interesting books I think from this corner. And moving on to this shelf over here, here you can see all my classical Chinese books. I actually started my channel making videos on classical Chinese, but I don't think those videos really get any views these days. But yeah, these are my classical Chinese books. I love studying classical Chinese, but it's such a niche topic. It's hard to find people to discuss this with. And one recent addition to this corner is this copy of Journey to the West. This is actually just one part of Journey to the West. The entire novel is absolutely massive, and this publisher decided to split the entire novel up into several parts. So this is just part one. The reason why I got this is because I played the game Black Myth Wukong, and I just loved the game. I just loved the gameplay, the story, the music, the graphics, everything. And as a Chinese person, I actually did not. I'm actually not that familiar with Journey to the West. I know of the famous characters, all the famous scenes, but I don't think I know Journey to the West particularly well. So I don't think I understood Black Myth Wukong that much better than a non-Chinese speaker. So I wanted to learn more about the story, so that's why I got this. But even so, I've only ever leafed through this briefly like a reference text. I think I should find more time for it. And so yeah, this in the until I get to that, this has been and will be sitting here collecting dust on my shelf. And then over here, you see this massive brick wall of Chinese novels. I haven't moved this corner that much over the past few years. I don't know if you would know anything about this series if you're a non-Chinese speaker, but these novels are absolutely massive in the Chinese-speaking world. These are what we call wuxia novels. So they're kind of like medieval fantasies, but in China and in ancient China, where everyone's a kung fu master. And that's the premise. But these books are absolutely outstanding. These are fantastic reads. I read all of these back when I was in high school. I still come back to them time to time. I just absolutely love these novels. It's just hard to describe to someone who uh, might not be familiar with this genre. But yeah, I just really, really love these. And up here, hiding up in the corner, we have The Case Against Perfection by Michael J. Sandel. This is a book on bioethics. It's pretty interesting and it's pretty short. I actually really recommend this. You can finish this in like one sitting, and it covers topics like bioethics and modifying your modifying genetics and improving your body into like like the moral limits of improving human bodies into superhuman territory, and the moral quandaries surrounding topics like that. And if you're wondering what this is once again Final Fantasy VII. I got the special edition for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and it came with this beautiful little art book. I just really like this. And let's take a look inside. You have all the main characters, all the interesting locations. I just love the game, and yeah, it was really nice to have this as well. And then moving on to the shelf on top, here we have this very eclectic collection of all sorts of books you would find under the sun. Starting off with here, we have this series of unfortunate events. I think I read this when I was like 8 or 9 or something, and these books have literally been sitting here for more than a decade. I don't remember what happened in these, but they look fantastic on my shelf, so that's why I have them here. And here I have some books on poetry. This is a book on poems from the Yuan dynasty. So these poems date back to at least 700 years ago. And this is a poetry collection of some really, really ancient poems. These date back to at least 2,000 years. So this is really fascinating to read. These are poems from the Tang dynasty. So these are at least 1,000 years old. So I just really enjoy these collections. I haven't read every single poem in these, but I do flip through them from time to time, and it's always fun to discover something new every time. And I have more books on poems in English. As you can see, we have poems from all sorts of different sources. You have sonnets from Shakespeare, William Blake, Emily Dickinson, American poems, and all that. Uh, so yeah, these are pretty fun to read. I have Animal Farm, The Inferno. I've done a video on that. And this is the Tao Te Ching. I don't know if that's how it's usually translated in English. And here, this is The Art of War. I really love this copy. And this is my Kindle where I do a lot of reading. I actually have this really bad habit where I would read a book on my Kindle, and if I really like it, I would buy the physical copy as well. So I often end up with two copies of the same book. So yeah, I have more books inside of this, but yeah, that's that. And this is, you might be wondering what this is. This is Harry's wand. And yeah, like I said, I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, and this thing actually has practical use. I can flip my light switch with this without leaving my seat, so this extends my reach pretty well. So this actually has pretty good practical use. And you might be wondering why I have a couple of copies of manga on my shelf. I am currently actively learning Japanese. I am not good enough to read and understand these entirely, but I am getting better, and these are useful gauges of my reading ability. This is Oshinoko, and there's an anime for this. I believe a new season is coming up in a couple of weeks. I think actually in a few days, but yeah. So that's so yeah. These are pretty useful materials for learning Japanese. And then moving on to the shelf on top, here we have more books. I don't think I've made too many additions to this corner over the past few years, but here we have this biography of Michael Jackson. Uh, I was a huge fan of Michael Jackson, uh, especially after he announced his comeback This Is It tour back in 2009, and then he died. I got this after he died, so that kind of sucked. But yeah, this is a really nice biography of Michael Jackson. This is a book on playing chess. I do play a little bit of chess, and I really suck. And I've read a bit of this. Haven't finished it yet. I always get completely addicted to chess. Whenever I start playing it again, just get glued to my computer. That's why I need to. I'm currently in withdrawal, so yeah, this is a habit I need to kick. And we have Sherlock Holmes, some more poetry texts, and the Song of Ice and Fire series. So supposedly George R. R. Martin is still writing The Winds of Winter. That has been in production for more than 15 years, I think, at this point. I don't think I'll actually get around to reading Winds of Winter when it comes out, because when it does, it'll probably be more than 1,000 pages long. And now that I have a full time job, I just don't think I have the time and energy to commit to a book like that. And honestly, my memory is kind of crumbling. I don't. I might have to study what happened in the previous novels to dive back into Winds of Winter. So that'll be a lot of homework. So I don't think we'll see. Maybe I will get to reading Winds of Winter if it does come out, but I'm not too sure about that. People are still doubting whether George R. R. Martin can actually finish this project that he started. And actually, if he can't finish it, I completely understand why. This series has become such a massive thing. I don't think it's possible for one guy to finish by himself. So I completely understand if he can't finish it by himself. But yeah, that's the state of of this series. And then moving on, we have this really ancient collection of history from China. This was from kind of like the Herodotus of China. So historically speaking, this was a very significant text. It was a very conscious effort by one guy to document the history of China up till. So this dated back 2,000 years ago, and back then they already had 2,000 years of history to document. So this is a very historically significant work. Obviously, I haven't read through the whole thing because it's utterly massive, but I've read through quite a few chapters for these four volumes. So these center around biographies of really important figures in ancient China, just heroes and politicians and generals and important people from that period. So this is really interesting as well. And then moving on, we have a couple of popular philosophical books. We have Justice by Michael J. Sandel. I really enjoy this. A friend of mine introduced me to this, and it's just such a accessible introduction to ethics. So I learned a bunch from reading Justice, and so after Justice, I moved on to What Money Can't Buy. But I was a little disappointed by this because I was hoping for more discussions on how we can use philosophical reasoning to judge through different different tough cases on ethics and moral philosophy, but this was instead just an endless list of examples for cases where money was used in morally questionable ways, like for example, like buying a way out of a military draft, and I was a little disappointed by that. And then he released The Tyranny of Merit, and then I kind of stopped halfway through this because I just wasn't that appealed by the subject matter, and I think it's a little bit too American focused, and so yeah, I'm just the type of guy who just stops reading a book if it doesn't appeal to me. And then we have The Wasteland and Other Poems from T.S. Eliot. I think this is a beautiful copy. I really like the cover. And then near the back, we have one of my favorite poems, The Hollow Men. I just really like this copy. And so moving on, in case you're wondering what this little package is, this is the Philosopher's Stone, the one that Hagrid was taking down to Gringotts. So you can see my bookshelf is actually just full of Harry Potter merchandise. And continuing on, you have two copies of The Inferno. Made a video on these as well, and another chess book. I think this is geared. This is just really geared towards learning how to checkmate someone properly. So if you don't know what a checkmate is, you can definitely learn something from this. But if you do, I don't think you need this at all. And then I haven't moved these books in more than a decade. You'll start to see a pattern here emerging. I have a couple of blocks of books that I've just kept sitting on my bookshelf collecting dust that I haven't moved in many, many years. So this is another collection that has been sitting here for a very, very long time. And then you'll see I have a couple of more wands, the Elder Wand, Voldemort's Wand, and Snape's Wand. And then moving on, just have a couple of few more books in this corner. Biography from Einstein. This book is way too advanced for me. I think I got this and then I realized this was just way beyond my ability to comprehend. But this is very useful. This is a book full of chess puzzles. So if you like that kind of thing, you can just spend an entire day poring over this. And I think the most fun you can derive from a book like this is to find a friend who has a similar ability in chess and to just pore over problems together, and that way you'll help each other improve. And here I have a autobiography, My Life as a Quant by Emmanuel Derman. The reason why I got this was because I had to study this textbook for an exam I had to take for work. The textbook was called The Volatility Smile, and then I realized the author himself has a PhD in physics, and I really like physics, so I was very interested in the author. And it turns out he has this autobiography, so I was interested in what he had to say, so I got this. And so yeah, and here we have a very, very good video game tie-in novel, The Corroded Man from Dishonored. I don't know if you've played Dishonored. I'm a huge fan of the Dishonored games. I played through the first one, the DLCs, Dishonored 2, Death of the Outsider. I played them all. Uh, there are actually three tie-in novels. There's one called The Return of Dowd, and then the third one, I forgot what the title was, but this is the only novel that is worth reading. I've read the other two on my Kindle, and I was really, really disappointed by them. But this was a decent read. So if you're a fan of Dishonored and you're interested in these books, I recommend just reading The Corroded Man. I read The Corroded Man on my Kindle as well, and like I said, I have this bad habit where I tend to buy two copies of books that I enjoy. So I enjoyed this, so I got the physical copy as well. And one thing I really like about this is that at the start of each chapter, it comes with an excerpt of supposedly a text that comes from the Dishonored universe. So it just adds a lot of just a little bit of lore that comes with each chapter, and just makes the book that much more interesting. So this is definitely a book I recommend. Only this book, don't get the other two. And Dictionary of Basic Japanese Grammar, because I'm learning Japanese. And then finally, moving down to this final shelf. This is the shelf that has seen the most change over the past few years. And you can see this is a collection of books from all sorts of languages and topics. I do want to organize this a bit better, but I'm just running out of space. So you see, you have this book from The Last Airbender. I'm a huge fan. This is a book for a tabletop RPG, and I still have yet to find enough friends to play this with, but this book itself contains a lot of lore, so that still makes it worth getting. And here is a book on railway maps in Japan, because I'm a massive nerd, so I love maps. And here we have this massive collection of artwork from Van Gogh. I'm not an expert when it comes to art. I just look at art for fun, and this is my favorite portrait of Van Gogh because of all the swirls and his eyes just look so anguished. I just leaf through this from time to time. This also comes with a lot of commentary and just letters between Van Gogh himself and his brother, and also contains a biography of Van Gogh. And for this quality, the quality that they're offering with this book was actually pretty cheap when considering just how much is packed into this thing. And then I have a book on microeconomics I got from university. You can see this is a library book. I do not want to explain the embarrassing story behind how this ended up on my bookshelf. And some books on physics. Uh, these once again were used. I used it when I was in university. I think would be really useful for just physics courses in your first 2 years if you're a physics major, special relativity and mechanics. And then this is a book on mathematical proofs. So this is the kind of book you would tend to be recommended in, once again, your first 2 years of university if you're studying mathematics. It kind of pushes you towards doing proofs instead of doing computation. I think people, for example, like in high school, we tend to do a lot of computation, but not enough proofs. And this book will kind of ease you into this new mode of thinking about mathematics. And then it comes with a lot of proofs about set theory and algebra and calculus analysis, all that. So this is a really good collection of topics on mathematical proofs. And then you can see I have more of these books, some kids' books in Japanese. Once again, similar to the manga copies that I had in my other shelf. These are used. I use these kids' books to kind of gauge my reading ability. This is a book for kids on Japanese shrines. This is Nippon Chizu, so this is like maps of Japan. Once again, maps. And this is Majo no Takyubin, which is just Kiki's delivery service. I do love Studio Ghibli films, and actually, my favorite Studio Ghibli film is Kiki's Delivery Service because I think it's just such a fantastic story on growing up. It's a very simple topic, but I just really like it. Some people find it boring, but it just clicked for me. And this is a workbook for copying out Japanese characters. So for in Japanese, they have several scripts they use for writing. So apart from Chinese characters, they also use hiragana and katakana, and that's I knew hiragana back from when I was in high school. I learned hiragana back then, but I was not very familiar with katakana. So I started learning Japanese like 18 months ago, and then I started by uh, learning katakana with this workbook. And then continuing on, once again, Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is a cookbook for the food you would find in the show. Uh, I'm not I'm not a foodie. I'm not the type of person who cares too much about what I eat. So I guess this book is kind of wasted on me. But I'm such a huge fan of the Last Airbender universe. I just had to get this to see what was contained inside. And then once again, another book on maps of Japan. Then we have classic set theory. This is a very good textbook on set theory. Uh, it goes from all the foundational axioms of set theory and just builds out the number systems, like the natural numbers and the real numbers, and then just shows you how everything is constructed and built. So this is a very fascinating read. And then here we have some video game tie-in comics. This is from Dishonored. This is from the Horizon Zero Dawn universe. I also really enjoy the Horizon series, Horizon Zero Dawn, Horizon Forbidden West. I can't wait for the next game. And then just some textbooks I used to learn Japanese with. I recently just took N3. I think the results will be coming out in a month. I'm pretty sure I passed. Just depends on whether I pass, uh, just what my score would be, and so yeah, I'll have that to look forward to. And more textbooks on mathematics. I really liked Analysis 1. This was a fascinating textbook that just opened my eyes. Starts off by building the number systems and then just works your way all the way to calculus, integrals and derivatives, like the logical foundation behind everything. And Terence Tao was such a good communicator. He writes in a very lucid and conversational style, so that makes this book very easy to understand as well. So I really like this analysis textbook. And then this on general relativity, I do not know. I am not qualified enough to talk about general relativity. I want to learn general relativity, so that's why I got this textbook. And then some friends told me this is probably way too abstract. This Walt's textbook is probably way too abstract for someone like me, so I should have gotten something a bit more accessible before diving into this. So this will probably just be sitting here for the next 10 years. And then yes, more video game books. League of Legends. I don't play League of Legends that much, but I really like the story and all the other tie-in stuff like Arcane and all the music that comes with the League from the League universe. So that's why I got this as well. And then more Avatar stuff, and then math, physics, linear algebra, quantum mechanics. This is once again you have Chinese because I got this from a Chinese bookstore, but the content itself is in English. And then this is a excellent analysis textbook I used back in university. If you're getting into real analysis, I definitely recommend this copy. And then I got this book on topology because I want to learn more about just topics like topology and differential geometry to prepare myself for general relativity. But this is still an ongoing project. This has been sitting here. I think I will get started on this at some point, but not sure when. And moving on, these are just books I think I will read in 2026. These are books, test prep books for my Japanese exams. I've actually already finished N3, so I'll probably be focusing on N2. And then this is Murder on the Orient Express. I haven't read a single Hercule Poirot novel after all this time, so I think that's kind of like a crime. So that's why I got this. And then this is Sherlock Holmes: His Last Bow. I've read all the first three Sherlock Holmes short story collections, uh, the Adventures, the Memoirs, and the Return, and also read the first three novels, but I haven't gotten around to reading The Last Bow, so that's why I got this as well. And then this is the Odyssey because Christopher Nolan is making a movie on the Odyssey, which is gonna come out later this year, and I'm a huge Nolan fan, and that's why I wanted to get started on the original text before I watched the movie. And who doesn't love an epic poem from ancient Greece? And this translation is really nice. It's really accessible, but also feels very poetic. I think the translator has done an excellent job, and so I highly recommend this edition if you want to get into the Odyssey. And I think he's also done a translation for the Iliad as well, but that's a different story. So yeah, probably be working on this in the coming months. And then here we have just more tie-in books. Have this, this is a comic from the Avatar universe, the Avatar Last Airbender universe. That's a art book from Final Fantasy. Those two are tie-in books for the Game of Thrones universe, and that final book hiding in the corner, that's a book from the Last Airbender universe. That's a art book from that universe. And so that pretty much concludes the state of my bookshelf. And if you made it this far into the video, thanks for watching.